Welcome to Phenomenal Conversation number 53, with the working title Promoting Regenerative Education. I always change the titles once I've done the dialogue, but that's the working title today. I'm very pleased to welcome Luis Camargo from Colombia, one of the few people from South America I've interviewed in the series. So I'm really pleased Luis has made some time today. And before we go into the interview, I'll just explain a little bit about Phenomenal Conversations. So in Phenomenal Conversations, we interview change makers that I feel that are living the change. They're not just lecturing about it. We try to amplify imagination in the midst of the polycrisis. We try to promote meaningfulness and nuance in a chaotic world. And then we also... I've forgotten the fourth one. We also try to ask meaningful questions. So those are the four parameters. And just to state that there are two formats. There's the one-on-one format, like I'm interviewing Luis now. And then also once every 6 to 12 weeks, we have a live podcast where I interview a change maker and we invite a group in that can participate and we harvest collective wisdom after the fact. So, and if you like this video series, please like, comment, share, and subscribe below. So thanks, that's the intro done. Luis, over to you. Please share some relevant background, a little bit of your history that people that don't know your work can get a little bit of an introduction to you.
Well, hi, Dave, and I'm really excited to be here and engage in this conversation with you. So my name is Luis Camargo. I'm from Bogota, Colombia. Born and raised in Colombia. I had the opportunity to go to college and university in the United States as a mechanical engineer, and then a Master of Fine Arts. So I guess relevant to my story, since I started, I've been searching for what brings sense to me.
Yeah.
So I started in engineering and then realized my heart didn't resonate with that and in terms of professional working function. And then I moved to the other opposite, to arts. But I think those two processes really brought me to where I am today, in the sense that it gave me an allowance to understand that the world is not only logical, it's also creative.
Yeah.
And we need to have both. We can't really decide one world, the world is quite complex.
Yeah.
Another thing that has been very common in my life has been nature. I come from Colombia, which is one of the most biodiverse countries of the world. And during my youth, I had, a lot of opportunities to be in nature with family. I remember my grandfather had, productive farms, and we used to spend a lot of our, let's say, free time and vacations going to these natural spaces and exploring. So I am also an explorer at heart. I've been a climber, kayaker. I've really engaged in many of the outdoor sports that you can imagine, and participated as a mountaineering instructor, as a expeditionary member of the Colombian Himalayan team, of the first group that actually went towards the Himalayas and to the 7 summits. So this is also really important because my time in nature has been quite important to what I became and what I'm doing right now.
Right.
With all that, I founded OpEPA. OpEPA is the Organization for Environmental Education and Protection in 1998. With the objective of reconnecting people to the earth in order to accelerate the transition towards sustainable and regenerative cultures. And this was inspired by all my experiences and looking critically at the state of the earth, especially after, Rio de Janeiro in 92, and questioning, what is it that we're doing? And I realized it's not what we were doing. It's how we were relating and how we were becoming more separated from nature as time went through. And as time went by, instead of being nature, which we are, we started to become something else. And
Right.
we started to other nature in many ways,
Yeah.
so profoundly that we came to the belief that humans were not nature. And
Yes.
everything outside is nature in service of humans.
Yeah.
And I guess this was my conclusion. And in order to address this, we created OpEPA to really look at ways of bridging and trying to reconnect people once again, especially children and youth, but
Yeah.
also others, so we could address this relational crisis that we were having.
Well, that's really interesting because I've interviewed a number of people in this regenerative space, and I think there's also a struggle, even with people that are doing same or similar work, to overcome or see through, perceive the dualism inherent in nature-based education, of where nature is still an object to some degree. So how do you think you're able to work with that separation, full separation, and create healing or integration?
Okay, the first thing is that our semantics are based on our perspectives and the lenses we use to look at the world.
Yeah, yeah,
So this is, a good example is the elephant, where you have different people around the elephant.
yeah,
Some are blind, some are, deaf, some, and they only have access to one piece of the elephant.
yeah,
They could each state that the elephant is whatever they're feeling. One says it's a certain, the other one feels, it's a big stool. The other one feels each feels different.
yeah,
And none of them is right. So there's really no dualism. Dualism is created by the lack of capacity to perceive holistically.
yeah,
So
yeah,
only when you look from out far and see the elephant, you
yeah,
realize that one was the tail, the other the trunk, the
yeah,
leg, but it was all part of the elephant.
yeah,
And I think something similar happens here.
yeah,
As humans inhabiting our bodies, sometimes we believe we are independent and we are unique.
yeah,
Nonetheless, as we start understanding and allowing ourselves to understand, we realize we are definitely interdependent and interconnected
yeah,
in so many ways.
yeah.
And actually, even our bodies are not individuals. We're a
No.
collection of living organisms that create what we actually are. So
Yeah,
even our emotions are bacteria based.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah, yeah,
we're not independent at
yeah,
all. So in this process, what I realize is that we need to work with the all the lenses, and maybe sometimes all the lenses at the same time. So I understand and I know that when I say nature-based education, I'm putting nature outside.
yeah,
The thing is that we have to meet people where they are
yeah,
in order to come towards where we are.
yeah,
For me, it's education or it's learning.
mm.
And even, I don't agree with speaking of education itself. Education is also perceived as
Yeah,
something that needs to occur. And there's, a learner and a teacher
yeah,
interacting.
yeah, yeah,
So for me, learning is something that every species on Earth does.
yeah,
There
yeah,
every species is born, learns, dies. This is
yeah,
the
yeah,
cycle of life. So in that sense, nature-based education is really just a way of remembering
mm.
that we need to bring nature to the core of learning
Yeah,
and bring learning out into nature, because this engagement actually activates and awakens our relational being,
mm.
especially in being in relation with nature.
Yeah,
And because I do think that nature-based education really understands that we need to be multi-dimensional relation, let's say relationality.
yeah, yeah,
So we need to learn to relate with ourselves. It's something
yeah,
we have forgotten. We
yeah,
need to relate with others. It's
yeah,
something education is really focusing on social emotional learning and all that.
yeah,
But then we also need to learn to relate with nature,
yeah,
because ultimately, if you look at it as concentric circles, we are in the center as individuals and perceiving ourselves. But if we expand our identity a little bit, we become social individuals
Yeah.
We expand it a little bit more, we become natural individuals.
Yeah.
And the natural individual includes all more than human species, all human species, and all our inner
Yeah.
species, let's say.
Yeah.
So that's who we really are. We are nature. We are part of this magnificent, world of interconnections and interdependencies.
Mm.
And we have to start by looking inside, recognizing, awakening, and starting to develop our capacities to connect to each of the levels of relationality until the moment where our ego bursts a little bit.
Yeah.
And we go from let's say, ego-centered thinking to more eco-centered thinking, where we realize we are nature. And I think, who said it really well is Thich Nhat Hanh when he spoke of interbeing.
Yeah.
We need to realize our interbeing.
Yeah.
Because we are interrelated. So our being is actually the essential quality of being related.
Yeah.
And one last example on this is, if you were born and placed in a white room, totally isolated from the world, and you lived there with no light, with no anything, when you grew up, who would you be?
Yeah.
So you are the result of your relations. In that case, I don't know how you would evolve.
Yeah.
That would be,
No, it's hard to
probably there's
conceive
an
of.
experiment on that.
Yeah.
But if we put it in the contrast, we are born and we start relating with things.
Yeah.
And with nature and with people. And those relationships start molding who we are. So we are our interbeing. We are relational in essence.
Beautifully put and very, very well explained. I was struck by at the beginning of that description, you used the word remembering. So that would imply there's something in us already knows this interconnectedness, this beingness, and this interrelationality. There's some part of us, deep part of us, maybe not conscious, that already knows. So to what degree do you feel you're waking your students and your customers up to that capacity in consciousness, that kind of recognition, as it were?
So first of all, I agree totally with what you're saying. And there is research now that proves this. When we started, there was very little research associated to the human nature connection and relationalities. But now we know that, people, when exposed even to images of nature and landscapes, their cortisol levels reduce, and there is well-being associated to nature. And I think that's part of our bodies remembering we are nature. That's home. And the way we work, we work both with urban individuals and very rural individuals. Because it's curious, and sometimes we think that people that live in let's say, natural areas are deeply connected. And that's not necessarily the case. More so in Latin America, where it's been over 500 years of telling people, if you live in nature, you're a savage, you're worth nothing. The only way you can add value to your life is going to the city. So there is this dichotomy that we've created in our narratives. So precisely part of it is, really engaging in the way we learn from our minds, also the way we learn in our bodies, and the way we allow our emotions to emerge. And these three components, how they blend together to understand, our relationality with nature, but also understand the essential qualities of life. So that's one part of it. And the other is really allowing ourselves to, let's say, release the scaffolding that we've created, and to get out of the trenches. And I really love this framing from, cultural evolutionary theory, where, we actually have scaffolds that create, the structures that we abide by, and we feel they're rigid, and those are reality. But they're created by humans many times. And this is what we're seeing with our economy, with many of our institutional, or let's say organizational systems. But also we have protection systems that are our trenches, and we hide in there, and we try to hold on to whatever we know, because that's what we know. So moving into becoming adventurers into the unknown and to discovery is scary. And we're not being taught in schools to be adventurers. And if we look at the past of humans, we've always been explorers. We've always moved into the world and explored to learn. And this is the main mechanism of learning, explore, discover, learn. And maybe it's returning to that process. How can we really engage in allowing, especially children and youth, to really, explore, discover, and learn in natural environments with very little mediation of structures and scaffolds that are imposed. So I do believe there is a place to learn, very freely. And this is really important, especially in early age, when children are ultimately developing their nervous system. Neuroplasticity is actually reacting to those experiences. So if we have a kid that only sees, the primary colors and white walls and right angles, develop ways to understand those shapes and forms and that experience. But if we have a child that learns to explore and let's say live in a natural, very dynamic and complex environment with light flashing through the leaves that are moving, with sounds of birds and bees, with the smells, with the whole complexity of experience, then their nervous system will develop also in interaction with that. So I do think there's two qualities very different physiologically to how we develop. So first of all, learning in nature, with nature, as nature, from nature, is a really important part of this process. But then again, learning to take, also knowledge as we've developed it as humans, knowledge from the academics and everything we've learned, but also knowledge from what we can learn from our bodies, and then understand experience in the search of, moments like a sunset or a sunrise, the moment where a hummingbird, flies in front of you to feed on a flower right next to you. Those moments create what I call transcendent moments, or windows of opportunity. And those windows of opportunity allows us to really blend, both the intellectual or academic knowledge with our bodily experience knowledge, with our emotional knowledge, into those transcendent experiences that allows us, for fragment of seconds, to understand and feel that we are nature. And remembering we are nature becomes a key component, because it allows us to reawaken, like you said, to reawaken into that realization that, wow, I'm much more of what I perceive I am. If I look inside, I am in relation to everything that is also outside.
Beautiful. I totally resonate and find the degree of detail you're providing really inspiring. I'm wondering if we could I'd love to talk more about what you do to create those learning epiphanies, as it were, with the students you work with. But I think for people that less familiar with Colombia, basically we know it through popular media and Narcos and all of those kind of things in popular movies. But from your perspective, could you give a little bit of historical background of where you see, the nation is at the moment, given all of that is happening? I've also been on a course with Joe Brewer, who was doing a regenerative project in Colombia. So there's many facets. So if there's something important or that's shaping what's going on at the moment, it might be good for people to get that background before we go into the detail of the education that you provide.
Okay. So first of all, the first time Joe Brewer came to Colombia was invited by me.
Oh, was he?
When we created Regenerative Colombia initiative. So we
Oh, right.
created
Okay. Yeah.
a network initiative to connect regenerative people and regenerative projects in Colombia.
Yeah.
And we invited Joe Brewer as part of the Regenerative Communities Network, which
Yeah.
I'm also co-founder. And then Joe fell in love with Colombia and then ended up putting roots.
Yeah.
But Colombia is a complex beast. So
Yeah.
I think, and I'm not going to get into many of the politics,
No.
just the flows,
Yeah.
but I think the underlying quality of Colombia is diversity. And this is
Diversity. Yeah.
its great benefit, but it's also its great challenge.
Yeah.
So Colombia is a country with two oceans. We have access to the Atlantic, the Caribbean, and to the Pacific. We have the Amazon basin. We have the Orinoco basin, which is savannas, tropical jungles in the Amazon, and then the Andes. And we have the let's say the ending part of the Andes, if we move south to north, with three sierras or three cordilleras that go up to 5,700 meters in height.
Right.
So we have the closest, tallest mountain on Earth.
Yeah.
In less than 45 kilometers linear, we go from the ocean, the Caribbean, to 5,700 meters. So this, in terms of let's say, ecological opportunities and diversity in Colombia makes it incredible.
Yeah.
Because we have the influence from Central America and North America, from South America. We have some of the oldest formations before South America was formed. There was the Guyana Shield. So we're embedded in this place where diversity really flourished.
Yeah.
And this is why Colombia, I guess, it's the second most biodiverse country in the world. Yeah. But I would say it's the most biodiverse per square meter.
Yeah.
Because Brazil is number one, but it's huge.
Yeah.
Colombia is quite tiny compared to Brazil.
Yeah.
And at the same time, this, let's say, geophysical reality combined with the people and colonization and many of the forces that have happened in Colombia have generated quite diversity, a lot of diversity in Colombia of peoples. Yeah. So we have over 86 ethnic groups. We have all the mestizo or mixed groups with Spaniards and others that have come from elsewhere. And considering each of the groups have kind of evolved in such different environments, cultures, foods, and everything is quite different. Yeah. So diversity is incredible. I think Colombia is one of the, let's say, the most privileged countries in the world. Right. And I would say that if you take a seed from almost anywhere in the world, you'll find the place to let it grow in Colombia. And if you take a seed in Colombia and throw it to the ground, it will grow. Right. So Colombia is just bountiful and abundant. Yeah. At the same time, in our current predicament where the world and globalization aims to unify ways of thinking, to unify culture, to unify what we consume, to unify everything. Yeah. Diversity becomes a big challenge. Yeah. And generates a lot of conflict in many ways. Parallel to this, as you mentioned initially, there are many of the global consumer needs that really Colombia has seen that it can supply. Yeah. And especially when we're talking about not only coffee, which is really good, but we're talking about drugs and other things that might be bountiful also in Colombia. Yeah. Then we create another issue, which is a lot of people wanting to make a lot of money selling to those markets. And really this issue has been complex because from it, also evolved the guerrillas and social movements that are quite violent. So we've had a history of the last 70 or 80 years that has been violent nonstop in many ways. Difficulty to work in territories, government incapacity to see a country beyond the capitals, and work with the territories, difficult infrastructure to be built, and then all these actors in territories trying to gain power and control and money. So this really molded our country. And I think when we created OpEPA, one of the big challenges is that from this history, we had, in 1998, 1999, we had over 5,000 kidnappings a year that were reported of civil people. It was calculated, it was over 10,000. So really people had no want or no animosity with nature, because going out into nature was dangerous. Is where the guerrilla were. On the other hand, local communities could not go out into their nature because that's where the anti-personal minds were. So we had to work with a lot of youth in rural communities that they lost their limbs and stuff like that because of the conflict. So it was complex. And I think this reality just made nature more of the enemy than of the friend. So that is a reality that we started addressing by really focusing on urban kids and seeing how we could create safe experiences in nature for them to start reconnecting. And at the same time working with rural kids to start regaining their sense of place and sense of belonging, and to understand that their place is magical in many ways, and there's many opportunities, and they can actually value and have quite let's say strong leadership by working in this context. So this is how we started. And in terms of the context of the country, even though things have changed, there are cycles, I think. So we've had moments of less violence. Right now we're moving to a peak of higher violence. And I hope that then moves us into a peak of lower violence. And it's like everything in nature. We need to really harmonize that wave of opposites and figure out how we move forward. But it's a complex reality. It's a country full of opportunities, full of challenges. And one of the things I do want to move to the surface is that even though we've had this complexity of realities, the Colombian people are people that are so profoundly warm in their being. They're kind, they're loving, they're joyful, that have had the capacity to have incredible resilience and move forward. And I know in that resilience, we have the capacity to heal and to actually create an incredible future for the country. And considering that nature and geophysical characteristics of our country allows us to be so bountiful, allows us to have so many ways to adapt to climate change, to other global shifts. I am sure that if we're able to become more resonant, we can create an incredibly bountiful and abundant country full of joyful capacities.
Beautiful to hear that description of the Colombian character and its potential, which is wonderful, especially as I think you're practicing not only in diverse natural surroundings, but a diversity of challenges that many other nations, it's there are political and social challenges here in Europe, but the nature of the challenges there are pretty extreme. So you talked about the kind of epiphanies of creating epiphanies for the young people, where they recognize they're actually a part of nature, not just nature as an object. I would love to hear a little bit about how you design and organize your programs so you get this cross-fertilization between both the rural and the urban populations. I'm sure those educators, a number of them in my network, would love to hear about your work in that area.
Okay, so in that sense, I think there's, first of all, a gradient of experience. So right now we're living from nature, right? And that's how we relate. But You know, if we think of it, we can be living from nature, to be living in nature, to be living with nature,
Yeah.
to be living for nature,
Yeah.
to be living as nature.
As nature. Yeah.
And I think this gradient is really important to keep in mind, because it's also a way to understand the strategy to bridge
Yeah.
and reconnect. Because if we
Yeah.
have someone that is living from nature and understands themselves so separate,
Yeah.
it is impossible to bring them into a conversation to feel as nature. That
Yeah.
is like
Yeah.
jumping, you know, a huge divide that is unbridgeable.
Almost
So
as
we need
tall
to
as your
move.
highest peak.
Yeah, we need to move in small steps
Yeah. Yeah.
and create opportunities to realize things. So when we're living from nature, we need to move into nature to
Yeah.
start synchronizing our feelings, our experiences, and our knowledge. Because, as I said before, part of what we do is really combine, that academic learning. We need to learn about, we need to understand from our minds,
Yeah.
but we need to bring experiences that engage our bodies, that allow our senses to engage, our energy to interact with the energy of the world.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, these processes need to be in motion in
Yeah.
such a way that we have experiences that allow emotions to emerge.
Yeah.
And experiences are both, for example, a long day hiking in a forest, or silence sitting next to a creek.
Yeah.
Experience is a multifaceted,
Yeah.
idea. But if we have these three things, and this is how we build many of our programs, is making sure these three are together
Yeah.
while we are in very special and spectacular places in nature,
Yeah.
where we can find these moments of opportunity or windows of opportunity.
Yeah.
So, and this comes from, a realization I had before we created OpEPA. I've been an adventurer all my life, and a climber, and I love to move through nature. So for me, moving in nature is really important, and that's another quality of our programs. We do a lot of traverses.
Right.
So very few of our programs are static with base camps.
Yeah.
We usually go to one place and start moving through territories, walking and bicycle, ideally using our bodies, because that's how we create the physical experience. But when I was younger, and people would say, Luis, take me on one of your trips because I want to see the things you're showing me. We used to do slideshows and show people the places where we were visiting, and people would be at awe looking at the slides. But some said, I want to go. So we would take individuals in some of our trips, and I would commonly see people, for example, sitting on a rock looking at a creek in the middle of the afternoon, with monkeys jumping on the trees and the birds flying around. And I would see their eyes shifting from this opaque, quality to a shining quality.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this made me realize that, if we engage in processes, especially in spaces in nature that are these windows of opportunity where we can feel part of nature, even for a second, is going to be really, really critical.
Yeah.
So what I did was really start designing programs that, use the academic learning, the bodily and experience, the emotional, and brought people to places where it was more probable that these little windows of opportunity will occur.
Yeah.
So imagine you're walking up the Andes, and you're actually learning about the different life zones in the mountains and how vegetation changes. And obviously, in each place, you're learning about the plants, the trees, the animals. At the same time, you're walking, 1,000 meters up the mountain.
Yeah. Yeah.
Your body is being challenged.
Yeah.
Your mind is being challenged. You're suffering at the same time. You're enjoying. You're going through all these physical processes that lead also to emotional processes.
Yeah.
So we use a lot of, framing and questions and conversations to engage in open thinking and critical thinking as the process evolves.
Yeah.
But as we reach the camp, we know we're going to reach a place that we've selected to camp that is right close to a little hill where you can see the sunset in between the mountains, shifting colors, where you know you can see the magnitude of the climb you did, where you can see the distance, you can feel and realize that, wow, in 5 hours, 6 hours, I came from there. We're challenging a lot of the precepts that are created in a city where we usually don't see more than 30 meters ahead of us. And in those moments, as we get to this, we create a space of silence to engage in that experience, and then a space of conversation to process it. So these windows of opportunity allow what we call to create, or these transcendent moments, which allow us to realize many things, to realize the connection between what I learned in my mind with what I felt in my body, with how I related with everything around me during the day, with my emotions. And that allows me to reconfigure and reprogram, a lot of what defines me as a person, but also how I understand the world. And allows a different conversation, a conversation leading to how we are related, interrelated, and interdependent with others, even with ourselves. Because in these experiences, a lot of the initial discovery is to discover deeply who we are, what we are made of, but not from the ego. But if something that I just remembered, Einstein used to say that if we look deep into ourselves, we would see nature, and vice versa. If we would look deeply into nature, we'll discover ourselves. So I think this is one of those moments, is really engaging and giving opportunities for kids that usually are scuffled in our educational system to have the amplitude to experience and reflect and contemplate and come to these realizations. I do believe our current educational system is very intellectually focused, very structured and logical, and there's very little silence. The role of silence is fundamental. So in this case, opening spaces, allowing emergence, and also validating and allowing people to understand the world from a more complex or holistic approach, where knowledge, body, and emotions can connect. And then that can allow us, after our realization, to start shifting the way we act. And start defining who we are by how we define our relationships. And this is kind of the process. We actually design learning experiences, and we see learning not as a process of boxes, but it's a continuum. It's a flow. It's like moving through a river. So we need to create a flow that leads through all these experiences, that has many moments of realization, let's say micro moments, but then that allows to connect all these moments into a more transcendent realization towards, the end of the day. And then you collect 5 days of these type of experiences and really process and understand, the end of the experience, and how that translates to the real world, how that translates to how I relate with the world when I come home, and if that shifts my perception.
I was struck when you were describing your design or choice of the base camp, or the camp where at the end of the day's climb you'd chosen. But I was struck how many you interlinked, so many factors in that description. I think compared with education, which shuts so much out, that must be relatively effortless compared to all these structured linear marks and programs and ways of assessing and learning outcomes, as it were. That seems much more integrative.
It is challenging because you need also individuals and guides, let's say, are learning guides. I do think that teachers are more learning guides to learning than teachers. So I do believe in shifting the idea that we have learners that are empty vessels that need to be filled. But we co-learn, we co-experience, and we build together. But to be let's say a co-learner or a learning guide in these experiences requires also for you to be in tune with other things. So part of our work has been to really work with educators to allow them to get back in tune. And as you said, these are experiences we do, and this is how we started as OpEPA in our DNA. But this has moved towards things like the nature-based education networks, citywide networks, where we're working with teachers within public and private schools. And the process starts with them, how they can reconnect and live the experience themselves in order to open, let's say, the doorways so they can guide others in this process. And it's a process of awakening slowly from the ground up, I think. And I say from the ground because ultimately it requires to recognize and acknowledge the roots and our connection to the soil and to everything that the soil supports. Even ourselves, we are the result of the soil. If it wasn't for soil, we don't exist. So it's really interesting. And it's all about creating, learning ecosystems that allow for people to learn together, but in a relational space. So like I said, I think, we've moved and even into the agricultural field in regenerative work, where I'm working with conscious food systems with the Conscious Food System Alliance. We've moved this knowledge towards systems that help communities learn. And we've called this, how do we create communities of well-being from within? And it's about the relational qualities, 6 relational dimensions. So it's expanded, and I think it's really pertinent because it allows us to explore how we relate to ourselves, with our kin or family, with our community, with our natural environment. And those 4 relationships are, subject-subject relationships. They are basically the relationships that define our individual ego to our individual eco self. But beyond that, there's a relationship with ancestrality. And this I found quite interesting in the last few years, thinking on how we relate to time. Usually we talk about our ancestors, but we never really address that we are future generations' ancestors. So we need to start thinking on what type of ancestor will I be? And this is the 7th generation thinking of indigenous communities, ultimately. So it's really inspired by indigenous communities. And last is our relationship to agency, to action. How do we bring all the inner dimensions into fruition and become coherent in the way we act? And I think if we really address within our learning opportunities, both in schools, but also in organizations, these 6 relational qualities, we start shifting. Because if we look to create relations that bring well-being and vitality to our let's say, our environments, we ultimately will create communities of well-being. And those communities, will be more regenerative in essence. And like indigenous communities from around the world say, is really about coming into right relation and learning to come into right relation. And I think this is really profound. And for me, it changed the way I looked at a lot of the things and how I dressed them, is thinking and asking the question, am I in right relation to myself, to my kin, to my family, to others, to my ancestrality, to my way of acting? So this is kind of the conclusion of this whole process and what we're trying to bring, both in Colombia, but also now with the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, we're launching a global initiative on nature-based education that right now has, over 180 partners around the world.
Wow.
And will be, really engaging in activating a mycelial network of nature-based education actors around the world to start, inspiring learners and educational institutions and governments to start shifting, or at least opening the door for nature to come to the center, to the core of learning, and to allow kids to go out into nature. And I think UK, recently, opened that door by making it, mandatory for kids to have during their life, their school life. Now it's mandatory that schools engage in giving them time outdoors, right?
Oh,
And
okay. I
under
missed
the
that. I
stars.
missed that news.
Yeah.
I'm conscious of time, and I'd like just to turn the cycle back onto you, as it were, because we've heard you've got an immense amount of experience and knowledge of making this work, which is quite unusual because a lot of people are early beginners or just starting, or in the first few years. But I was curious to use some of your words and some of the terminology you use speak to something spiritual or something, if not religious, but something with a kind of spiritual, or you talk about deeper experience and these epiphany moments and going from ego to eco. So what have been your main influences in that area? Because for me, that plays a big role, although I don't have a denomination, as it were. So what would be the influences on you that have, or not, that have helped you arrive where you're at the moment?
Yeah.
Or is
Well,
that another conversation?
no, I went to a Catholic school,
Yeah.
Benedictine Catholic school.
Yeah.
But I don't think that was a key aspect
No.
of
Okay. Yeah.
maybe my spirituality. Actually, that brought me to many contradictions in terms of how humans interpret spirituality
Yeah.
and make it religions, and how
Yeah.
religions create violence.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm actually, especially nowadays, if we look at the amount of violence generated by religious thinking and dogma, it is, for me, it's unacceptable.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that is not spiritual whatsoever.
No.
So in that sense, what really has brought me is, since a little kid, exploring and being in nature for long periods of time.
Right.
I remember standing in Rongbuk Glacier at the base of Everest. We're talking about, I'm standing at 6,500 meters over sea level.
Yeah.
But if you look up, you still have, another 2,500 meters of mountains in front of you.
Yeah.
And you're in a glacier that is kilometers wide, and you've been walking 5 hours, and you're in the middle of this white, magnificent thing with blue skies, where ultimately what happens is that as you stand there in silence, kind of processing the experience, your body melts. And you start realizing you are almost insignificant in terms of dimensionality. You're very small, and you're only large as the earth, because you melt into the earth and you become one with the earth.
That's beautiful.
And that has happened to me kayaking in the ocean or in the forest. If you're in the middle of the Amazon forest, it is not very different. Actually, if you allow yourself enough time in nature and enough, let's say, silence or decluttering of the mind, you will come to this realization, because this is what we are as living beings. And these processes have shown me that, the place where I am complete is the place where I am in full relationality. So like my daughters sometimes ask, "Oh, so what is your church?" And I say, my church is nature. And I do think spirituality is really important, but spirituality not associated with dogma. So I
Yeah.
remember when I was studying after school, I, you know, after the questions I had about Christianity and Catholicism, I went to really explore other religions.
Yeah.
So I looked into Islam, I looked into Buddhism, I looked into the different expressions that were there, and realized that the basis of everything was basically the same.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is really not very different. What changes are the words and maybe some forms.
Yeah.
So that is one of the things that even in regeneration connects, because it makes me really question when I'm looking at forms, if forms are reality
Yeah.
or if I have to move to principle.
Yeah.
So what are the meta principles of what I'm engaging in?
Yeah.
And in this case, if I'm engaging in meta principles of spirituality, it almost connects me with the Hermetic philosophies,
Yeah.
the occult philosophies of you know ancient worlds,
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
we really are trying to understand this, our relationality
Yeah.
ultimately.
Yeah.
So spirituality is our capacity to open all the doorways to connect deeper
Yeah.
and to recognize our interconnectedness and interdependence in all dimensions.
Yeah.
So obviously in the physical dimensions we're here on earth, but I do
Yeah.
believe there are many other dimensions in energy, for example.
Yeah.
And I really liked, a lot of the studies I did in occult philosophies,
Hmm.
because as a young man, I had many, out of body experiences. I did a
Sure.
lot of
Yeah.
meditation. I did a lot of sweat lodges. I did a
Yeah.
lot of experiences that
Yeah.
ultimately brought you to the border of physical
Yeah.
reality
Yeah. Yeah.
and showed you the evidence that non-physical reality also exists. And
Yeah.
if you look at the indigenous communities, they all have ceremony associated with this.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think this is part of spirituality, allowing yourself to engage in this space, in between spaces, in this liminal
Mm.
space of existence. Um, and it doesn't have to be mediated by, substances or anything like that.
No.
Even being in wilderness, in landscapes that are awe-inspiring,
Yeah.
create those
Yeah. Those
spaces. So
conditions.
when
Yeah.
I say the windows of opportunity, it's
Mm.
actually bringing people to those spaces
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
allowing for silence and awareness and consciousness to open up in those liminal spaces, in the spaces in between, the moments of our realities.
Beautiful. That sounds like an incredible moment to end. Is there anything that you haven't said that you'd like to add before we close?
Oh, I
You've
would
said a
just
lot. You've said a lot. So,
I would just add an invitation to everyone that might be listening
yeah.
to really give yourself the gift of nature and of silence. That combination is crucial. And if you can do it with your family, even better. I've been so much enriched by not only these experiences with students and working, but when I brought that into my family life and really growing up with my children,
Mm.
sharing long periods of time in nature,
Yeah.
moving, in cycles, exploring different spaces together, allowing for silence together in a
Yeah.
world where technology sequesters our attention really has incredible value. And I
Right.
think remembering this and allowing ourselves to do this is fundamental. So if you have the chance, go out into nature, even if it's your park, or go out and explore and allow yourself a moment of silence in nature and just let go of everything. Allow that space of silence, especially declutter your mind and allow nature to bring its benefits to you, and I'm sure you'll be really happy. So that would be my invitation, and you know just do it.
Gorgeous adventure into nature too. I'm going to close that there, Luis. Thank you so much. Great to have had the benefit of your wisdom.
No, thank you, Dave. Thanks for the invitation. It's been a pleasure.
Great. Ending now.